just getting away from the narcissist doesn't make things all better. Have you noticed that yet? Sure, it's tons better to be away from that constant toxicity, but that's just not enough. We've talked with so many women who initially feel such relief that they think they're fine and can move on. But it doesn't take long for the novelty of that to wear off, and then they're caught off guard with a tangle of negative emotions just sort of tying up their wrists and wrapping around their ankles, tripping them up as they try with all their will to act normal again. What's sad is that I've seen women get caught in a state like this for a long, long time, not realizing that trying to shelve all those broken emotions and painful memories didn't make them go away. What they need is heart healing, emotional healing. Now, this is very different from trying to apply logic and reason to what's going on. Bear in mind, I'm not faulting logic and reason. It has an important role to play in dispelling confusion, but logic and reason alone can't heal an angry, disillusioned, broken heart. We need both. The good news is that you can partner with God to walk through a process of healing your heart and, here we go, kicking your spiritual enemy out of the equation. Now, I teach this process as part of my Cinderella No More program in the Cinderella No More Academy. So you're going to get basically this whole week. We're not going to go in depth, but I'm going to give you enough so you can get an overview of this particular process. It's just one piece of what we do in there. But I hope that it'll give you encouragement that there is a process to walk out of this. So we're going to introduce you to steps of this process today and the next 4 days. Now, today we're going to look at the first 3 steps. When do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I just wanted to remind people too of what you just said, that the contrast of being out of the relationship and where you are now is so big. It feels like, oh, that's over and done. And when you get to your new normal, that new normal isn't necessarily enough. It's a big difference, but it's not enough. And your process is really powerful. And there's steps to it. And this first step is actually to be still and ask. And I've heard you describe this as a just chance to let God talk to you and tell you where to start. Because I don't know about you, but if I see a huge patch of weeds, part of me just wants to grab it all at once and pull it out. And you always have to start in a small corner. You can't jump right in the middle. You have to start in a small corner.
Right.
So you have to start somewhere. So how do you teach people how and where to start when they do this?
Yeah, great question. Because we do have a tendency to jump in, and we have a tendency to think that, oh, we know the big issue that we want to go after. And maybe we do. But sometimes if you just still yourself by maybe just reading Psalms out loud until you kind of feel your spirit settle in, or just playing worship music and focusing on the lyrics, again, same sort of thing. It's just to just shut the noise out and just let you settle into an awareness of him and his presence, that you can listen better to the little nudges from the Spirit. And we want to ask him, which issue, for this time that we're sitting with him through this, which issue does he want us to look at? Because sometimes he'll point us to a root issue. And if we go there, then these, 3 to 5 other things that are symptoms of that root, those go away in one shot, one session with the Lord, and all that gets cleared up. Sometimes, though, if you're early on in the process, like maybe you just got out of this, or maybe you're still super raw from something that's happened, then sometimes he'll point you to a simpler issue first and allow you to just start practicing with him, and then he'll work you deeper. It just depends. He knows what's best. So just listen to him.
Yes, because sometimes we think if we could just do the big thing first, it'll all be over and then I'm done. And we don't realize sometimes we need to practice smaller things so we can trust God with the bigger things. And sometimes those smaller issues are ways for him to warm us up to the process, in a sense, and warm us up to his care and learn to trust him a little bit more each time. And so I can see where asking God first, so where do I start? And needing to be quiet enough to hear what he says is really, really important. So let's say we did that. We centered ourselves with some prayer or some scripture or some songs. We found a nice quiet place. We're not going to get interrupted. So we're feeling
Mhm.
calm. We feel like we can listen. It's quiet. What's next? What's the next step?
Okay, so this is the part that I just simply call it process.
Mm-hmm.
And this is so important. This is probably like the biggest part of the process in terms of your time commitment. And it doesn't have to be huge. Your time commitment might be, 3 minutes,
Yeah.
depending on the issue. Or if he's got you looking at a root issue, you might find yourself doing this one for 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But it takes however long it takes.
Yeah.
So the processing of this is what we're going to do before we actually dive into the healing, which is a transaction that we do with the Lord, but we have to do this legwork first. So we want to reflect on whatever that particular issue is that we're focusing on. And it helps to journal about it just to, it engages different parts of the brain and it just helps us sort it out. And this journaling it doesn't have to be intense. It can just be bullet points or whatever. No one's looking at this but you.
Well, and you don't even have to keep it. If you need to shred this thing
Right.
afterwards or burn it, or it's not like you have to have some journal that you're keeping all these horrible memories and you keep it on a shelf for the next 40 years. You can just use this as a way to focus yourself down.
100%.
So I can get rid of this when this part's done. You don't have to.
Absolutely.
It can be really useful to keep it, but you don't have to. So don't let that stop you feeling like you've
Mhm.
got to create this magical book of healing. No,
Right.
it can just be notes on a piece of paper.
Yeah. And even the big things, it doesn't have to be a novel. Like
No.
if you get into it and you feel like, oh my gosh, this is helping me so much. The more I write, the more I'm untangling it all, then
Mhm.
go for it. However
Oh,
long
yeah.
it takes, it
Right.
takes.
Yeah.
But if it's something that you can just write some bullet points and you can just look at that bullet point and you know exactly what's going on, that's fine. Do it that way. There's no
Mhm.
right or wrong way to do this.
Mm-mm.
But you just want to briefly note what happened, what you felt, maybe the impact of it. But here's an important thing I want you to do. In the process of working through this little simple journaling exercise, you want to name the painful emotions. Now, emotions, not just the thoughts. We tend to write what our thoughts were about it, but
Mhm.
we want to we're dealing with the heart, okay? So we want to get to the emotional side of this. And emotions more than just, I was mad, I
Mhm.
was hurt. We want to get to specific things. I felt betrayed. I felt rejected. I felt abandoned. I felt abused. I felt whatever it is.
Mhm.
And it may help you to go online and look up, just like Google feeling wheels.
They have
And there's
so
a
many
bazillion
of
of them.
those. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and almost any one will work, but it gives you 10 words for the word angry, and you might
Mm-hmm.
discover one or two of those fit so much better than just angry and help so much more.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And when we get stuck on anger, which a lot of times we do, well, anger is a
Mhm.
secondary emotion.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of stuff under the surface actually fueling the anger. So that's where that
Mhm.
feeling wheel, you can look at the category of anger and you can dig down into it. And
Mhm.
really what it might be is I feel ashamed,
Yeah.
things like that. So, but the whole point of this exercise is that you become ready to hand off these painful emotions. Like you
Mhm.
become entirely ready to release these to God. When we're going to sit with him in a minute, we are literally going to do an exchange with him. You're going to hand these
And
emotions to him.
and that's why because I've seen you do these groups, having a
Mm-hmm.
specific emotion, a specific word to hand off is
Mm-hmm.
so powerful for people. I've seen them name that and then hand that off, and that having that particular thing to take out of your hand and put in God's hand for help and
Mm-hmm.
healing is really important. So let's say
Right.
we've done that. We've gone through steps 1 and 2. Maybe it took us 5 minutes. Maybe it took us 45 minutes, but now we're on
Right.
step 3.
Mm-hmm.
So confession and repentance as needed. How do you work through that?
Okay. So here's the thing. When we work through this processing, then it can help clear the fog. And that's the whole point. We want to separate out facts and emotion. And in that process, not only do we identify the specific emotions, but we gain objectivity a
Mm-hmm.
little bit better because what we're looking for now is any issue that we need to own. And it might be just a piece of an issue. Maybe there was something that was 90% the narc, but the 10% was the part where you reacted and ran your mouth, or you did something else that was in
Did something
hindsight, you realize,
vengeful yourself. Did something like
yeah,
it
yeah,
can go anywhere from a tiny little white lie to something kind of big. And we're just
right.
trying to help you figure out at this point, it was any piece of this, even if I can tell myself I was just reacting to something horrific, was any piece of this something that I need to confess, that I need to work through, that I need to own?
Mhm. Right, right. And this is not judging from
No,
God, from us,
no,
from yourself. Okay. You're not condemning yourself over this. This
no.
is you just being honest before the
Mhm.
Lord, because you're wanting to clean house,
Yeah.
to have a clear slate from this. So this is just one part of what needs to transpire
And
with
really, this
everything.
is just, you don't want to leave any ground open
Hmm.
for
For the enemy.
the enemy to come in and plant something that will bear really bad fruit. You just don't want any ground that hasn't been given over to God for him to
Hmm.
plant good, healthy, holy things on.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because later this week, we're going to actually, a little spoiler here, we're going to actually talk about what that looks like, where
Mm-hmm.
now you stand up and kick the enemy out.
Mm-hmm.
And
But
if you
we're
haven't
still,
done this stuff, it's
yeah.
not going to work.
And that's why one of these things that we wanted to be sure to mention today on Monday is steps 1 through 3 can feel a little scary, especially if you've got to name emotions and you're used to pushing those things away, or if you've got to own up
Mhm.
to something, you're like, oh, I wish I had not done that, but I did. But you can't skip over these steps. What are the reasons
Right.
somebody should not skip over these steps?
Well, because if they if they skip over it,
Mm-hmm.
they're just going to be going around the same mountain around and around and around, because they're not going to
Exactly.
get the release and the healing, the permanent healing, otherwise.
Everybody's heard, I am sure, that story of if you're in a boat and the boat makes just a 1 degree correction, it can end up
Yeah.
3 days later at a completely different place in the planet. These are
Mhm.
like those first steps that orient you the right direction so that
Mhm.
all those other steps take you to the right place. Yeah, you
Right.
don't want to skip them.
And I'll tell you this, the rest of the process is relatively easy
Mm-hmm.
when you've worked steps 1 through 3. I mean, this is the bulk of the effort right here.
Mm-hmm.
And so you'll see as we get a little further along this week, but it's worth your time and effort, because here's the key that makes this successful. It's all of this is bringing you to the place where you're entirely ready and willing to release the pain you experienced and all
Mm-hmm.
the emotions surrounding it to the Lord. You cannot transition into steps 4 and 5 until you've done this. Otherwise, even if for the moment you thought, well, I'm going to give that to you, you're going to snatch it right back an hour from now.
Yeah.
And you can tell if you're not entirely ready is if you're not letting go of the anger, if you're still feeling like, but you don't understand what I've been through and how wrong this was, then you're not ready to move on. You need to come back and process this, and you probably need a therapist or coach
Mm-hmm.
to work with you through this. We do a lot of this kind of stuff. I see it all the time with our Cinderella No More program. So you're not alone if you're feeling
No,
that way. There's a reason. We're not judging you in that, but you just need
no.
to know where you're at in the process
Mm-hmm.
and why you have to do this. Okay, so that's some good stuff. And we went over that just pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to take a lot of time. It doesn't have to be hard, but it can be game shifting when you work through these steps well. So I hope you come back and join us tomorrow, because then we're going to walk you through steps 4 and 5. The work you did in steps 1 through 3 is really going to pay off, and you'll see that. And then after step 5, you're going to be amazed at how much lighter and freer that you feel. Now, throughout this week, you can reach out to us with your questions and thoughts. I'm sure you're going to have quite a few as we walk through this process. Just email us. We'd love to hear from you. Email us at hello@AnnetteChesney.com. And by the way, please help out this podcast by clicking like and subscribe to it, and share this episode with some others. Check out our show description too, because we've got some helpful resources there and some direct links that you can go access those. Now keep going, because we know your best is yet to come. We'll see you tomorrow.